C-Tag Studios proudly presents the Almost Daily ZenCast. With your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Thanks for tuning in and listening, folks. As always, I hope you're doing well. All right, let's get started. A Crisis of Consciousness. That's today's title. And I'm sure that most everyone agrees that we are certainly living through scary times and facing a wide array of different kinds of crises. Is that the correct plural of crisis? Crises? Or is it crisis-I? Crisi? Like the plural of octopus is octopi? I'm not sure. I'm not a grammar Nazi, so it doesn't matter, in my opinion. Anyways, today I wanted to focus in on a bit of text, or a mantra, if you will, a statement that has, for many years now, really facilitated me, helped me as an individual, through the suffering that I experience when I feel overwhelmed by the vast array of confusing and intense and complex and complicated issues that we all face together as a species. There's a lot of crazy shit going on in the world. And anyone out there with love in their heart and compassion for other human beings wants to, wishes to, craves and longs to find a solution to one crisis and then the next and then the next and then the next. As a very wise friend of mine once said, in pragmatic terms, we cannot save the world by ourselves. We can only work on saving one or solving one problem at a time. And that's true in the pragmatic sense. And we can definitely get carried away trying to save all the problems and then wind up not being able to do anything. And this is especially true when we are really externally focused. Now, as always, as I like to say, let's take a big spiritual step back. Let me introduce to you this text, which I've used as a mantra for quite some time. The source is a film, actually, called Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds. You can easily find it on YouTube. I have nothing to do with this film. I'm not being asked to promote it by anyone involved with the film, etc., etc. This is not a commercial endorsement. I believe in the words I'm about to read to you. And if you know me, if you follow my social media at all, you know that I'm really selective and very picky and very careful about using the word believe or belief. Because belief manifests. Belief is an organic and intrinsic power of the human being, which is necessary to live whole spiritual lives. We have to believe in ourselves, and we have to believe in each other, and we have to believe in all the good things that, help lift each other up. Of course, our world, our society, this postmodern culture that we live in, barrages us from day one, from the moment we're born, with a whole slew of ideological concepts that we are supposed to believe in, that we are expected to believe in from religion to politics. And what I'm about to read to you, I think, addresses the problem or the core problem, in a very eloquent way. So, without further ado, I'm going to read this meme. Oh yeah, I made this meme. I'm not claiming authorship of the text, of course, but when I saw this film years ago, Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds, probably 6 years ago, I guess, I was struck by this particular passage so deeply, so intensely, and it motivated me so much that I said, this needs to be shared. I had been aware of the meme thing, right? You know, I may be an old fogey. I may not be a young millennial or whatnot, but I'm pretty keen on what's going on in the internet, and I was aware of memes. I just had not jumped into the hobby of making them because I didn't really think I had anything to add or to say via that media. And it wasn't until I fell in love with this film and then wanted to share its message, because there's many, many wonderful passages in this film. It's rather long. It's a 4-part, quote-unquote, documentary, although some people would say it doesn't qualify as a documentary. That's why I use quotes. But it's just a film. I like the word film, capital F, film. And I just distinguish that, as opposed to a movie, to give it the respect and honor it deserves. I fell in love so intensely with this film and its message and so many of its deep, powerful, inspiring passages that I decided to create memes based on its text, to honor it and to share it and to try to bring it to other people's attention. I think I made about 3, and then I got really sidetracked down the general meme-making rabbit hole. And here I am, a humble meme farmer years later that obsessively, compulsively makes memes about all kinds of things. But here we go. If you've been a longtime follower of my social media, you've probably seen this, because I post it probably about 2 times a year. I try not to overdo it, because I know how quickly we can become bored or desensitized. I can never pronounce that word. Forgive me. We can become jaded by something that we see too often. Ironically, also, this is how marketing works. We need to see the same image or the same message at least 7 times before we really, truly engage with it. At any rate, without further ado, here is this passage from Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds. I'm going to read it to you in whole, and then we're going to break it down, okay? The true crisis in our world is not social, political, or economic. Our crisis is a crisis of consciousness, an inability to directly experience our true nature, an inability to recognize this nature in everyone and all things, realizing that there is only one consciousness. To awaken one's true self, one must awaken all beings. There are innumerable sentient beings in the universe. I vow to help them all to awaken. My imperfections are inexhaustible. I vow to overcome them all. The Dharma is unknowable. I vow to know it. The way of awakening is unattainable. I vow to attain it. All right. That's a mouthful. There's a lot to unpack there. So let's go line by line. The true crisis, and let's address that word right there. Crisis. It is a crisis, the situation that we are in. And I think a lot of people already sense that intuitively and intellectually. You see the fear all over social media. You hear it, in conversation with others out in public. You sense it when you try to think about the world that we live in. It's in crisis mode. And on the surface, it seems like there's a massive array or collection of crises, so many that most of us just sort of go blah and shut down and stop trying to fix anything and focus on either self-oriented things, which is not inherently bad. It's sort of a 50-50 sort of. You can be self-oriented and be self-righteous or self-abasing. You can be self-oriented and be focused on your own healing and your own self-liberation. As I mentioned in our previous episode, there are two fundamental functions in the universe: the downward spiral of ego trap and the upward spiral of enlightenment. Okay? So at every step of the way, at every moment of our life, we have this sort of collection of options, as we already outlined. And sometimes when we are confronted with this overwhelming set of situations in the world, everything from, the Trump-Putin connection to the endless war in the Middle East, that we just sort of turn a blind eye. We tune things out. Trump, what's the word? Trump exhaustion or Trump fatigue is setting in already. And it's been a month plus a day or, in a few days. And war fatigue is nothing new. It's been around since World War II. We're just tired of talking about it, and so we focus elsewhere. Okay? Now, so there's no denying that the world we live in, the postmodern society, the situation that we find ourselves, the conditions that we are born into, is that of crisis. And there's many of us who have not given in to the fatigue yet, who are enraged by this crisis situation, and many more that are really, really busy arguing about the nature of the crisis, pointing fingers, laying blame. It's your fault that we're in this mess. It's their fault we're in this mess. It's the devil. It's the Russians. It's the Illuminati. This is important to clarify. Being caught up in the laying of blame for any given individual crisis or the collective mess of many crises is a distraction. It is an ego trap in and of itself. No problem is ever solved by bitching and moaning about it and blaming it on someone else. Now, I'm not saying that it is your fault, but I am saying that as a species, we have to collectively take responsibility for what we have created. And I know we're all born innocent into this world. Those of us today born now did not ask for the problems of the past. We inherited them. But we are one species. We are one people. And if we agree to the terms of transcendental or mystic or shamanistic or Buddhist thinking, then we are one being. We are one being residing in each of these bodies. Okay? So laying blame on other achieves nothing. Being distracted by the source of the cause, politics, economy, etc., is also a distraction. None of those activities help us solve the problem. Okay? Now, whoever authored this text gets right to the fucking heart of it. Our crisis is a crisis of consciousness. Of consciousness. What does that mean? What is consciousness? That's a big, heavy-duty, epic question, which I'm sure we'll delve into in great depth in other episodes. But let's try to get to it really simply right here and right now. Who are you? Right? You are that which is experiencing the life you're living. Is that your name? No. Is that your body by itself? Not really. Although your body is the instrument by which you are observing it. But you are not your eyeballs. You are not your nerve endings. You are not the electromagnetic impulses running to your brain and, assembling there and recreating that image to be perceived. You know how we can prove that? because you are perceiving that. And that which is perceived is not the perceiver in pragmatic terms. Obviously, in the big metastructural sense, all is one, and of course everything gets blurry, and then we're talking about an indistinguishable unity. But we don't, while that is the case, yes, we live in duality, right? Duality, non-duality coexist. That's the problem, or the catch-22 of relativistic, fractal, holographic universe, is that duality, non-duality coexist at the same time. So let's not get distracted by that. The crisis is a crisis of consciousness. Okay? So consciousness is that which sits at the root of your phenomenological experience. In other words, you are not that which you are witnessing, you are the witness. Therefore, the crisis of the world resides in that place where our ideas about the world are generated and are confused for, we try to conflate them with that which we actually are. All right? The author of this passage, I wish I knew their name. I'm sure it's all in the credits of the movie, Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds. Goes on to, so the author goes on to really break it down. The crisis of consciousness is an inability to directly experience our true nature. Now, this inability is not a handicap. This inability is not some form of weakness or failure or moral unworthiness. It is part of the test that we are living through. We did it to ourselves. If we want to talk about it in terms of good guys versus bad guys, here in the material realm, some of us people, some of us human individuals, a long, long time ago, realized the whole thing about the upward spiral, downward spiral thing. And they realized that profiteering, making profit, it's more profitable when more people are on the downward spiral of ego trap and fewer people are on the upward spiral of ascension. The more people are working their way up the spiral of ascension, the fewer people the profiteers can profit on. Thus, this inability to directly experience our true nature is something that, in part, is the result of brainwashing that we have received, force-fed, forced upon us by those that are oppressing us. Okay? That in practical terms, in pragmatic terms, in the mundane world, they are doing it to us because we are experiencing separation here, right? Now, in spiritual terms, we are doing it to ourselves. Why? As a test. That is the classroom that we're in. Do we choose ego? Do we choose enlightenment? Okay? So we've brainwashed ourselves, not just recently. This isn't something Donald Trump invented. This isn't something that the Republican Party invented. This is something that's been going on since the end of that golden era represented by Saturn, the sun, being at the center of the sky, which is a whole nother episode, folks. In other words, to put it in simple terms, there's a lost epoch in history that occurred before the time when the Tower of Babel happened. The Tower of Babel is both a symbol and a real thing, okay? And we'll do a whole nother episode on that, but let's just take that as given. There was a period in time before our historical records accurately depict things correctly that we call prehistory. And during that prehistory, believe it or not, there are ways to evidence this out. I just don't have all the links here at my disposal because I'm focusing on this text here. That the Tower of Babel represents the end of this era. And that's when I proposed to you that the brainwashing really began. The brainwashing to condition us to look only externally at the material world and ignore our internal relationship with the divine. That is why we as individuals generally have an inability to directly experience our true nature. Now, when we are born as innocent children, you can tell that they are one with themselves. That's why they are both a blessing and a bit of an annoyance to the rest of us, Babies are beautiful because they're so innocent and so pure and so just at awe permanently with the divine gift of life. They're also not indoctrinated in social norms. They are not indoctrinated with all the things that we call societal structures and normalcy. You know, we haven't beaten into them yet. And we all play this game of indoctrination. I think it was Confucius, or someone commenting on Confucius's work, that said indoctrination is necessary. We need to train young children how to be collaborative and productive members of society. But once an individual has produced and contributed to society, we must liberate ourselves from that indoctrination, or else we will fall into deeper ego trap, right? More on that topic in another episode. So this confusing tool of indoctrination is something we've had for a really long time, pretty much since we invented language in the deep, deep mists of prehistory. And it can be useful, like a sword can be useful, or a gun can be useful. Let's not get sidetracked on those subjects. But let's get back to this. Indoctrination can be useful, but it was hijacked by those who wanted to prevent us from the second part of the process. Okay? It's a two-part process. Dichotomies. Everything's a mutually arising dichotomy. So, you know, to function in the material world, we have to teach ourselves some basic indoctrinating type things. Like, you know, pissing on each other is not a fun thing to do. Babies, they just let their fluids go whenever, right? So we need to indoctrinate them to not pee on us and to hold it in and use a toilet. But the second half of that entire process is the liberation from indoctrination, so we can return and come home to that place of direct experiencing of our true nature. This has left us, this indoctrination and this false bifurcation, this cutting off of the second half of the process has left us blind to our true nature and unable to experience that exact same phenomena in others and in all things. Why is that important? Because our true nature is divinity. And isn't it interesting how all the world's religions simultaneously have some statement by the prophet that says God is in you, whilst also the commentary and the material around the prophet's teachings teach us or claim to lead us away into this place of separation from God. We're not worthy to be with God until we've fulfilled his commandments. We need to rely on the intercession of others, some middleman, to help us commune with God. That's all nonsense. Our true nature is that of the divine being embodied in flesh, playing a game of hide and seek. Now, many people have spoken and addressed to this issue. If you want to hear others talk about it, probably more eloquently than myself, I strongly recommend Alan Watts. There's also Mooji, Mooji, and, there's plenty of spiritual teachers out there teaching this stuff. So I'm not the crazy one. It's the crazy thought, the crazy ones are the ones that are clinging to and defending the notion that we are completely separate and isolated from God. We aren't. God resides right there at the center of our phenomena. Okay? And that is the crisis. That crisis then propagates all our other problems. Why? Because ego, and this is ego's job, so we shouldn't get too pissed at ego. Ego is a structural phenomenon in the human species that is there to make the game that we're playing as divinity interesting, to keep those stakes high, to keep us perceiving the world as if we're desperately in danger of losing the game, which we can't lose. We cannot lose the game because we ourselves are divine consciousness. But ego's job is to reinforce the indoctrination of separation and to make us doubt whenever we come a little bit close to that self-actualization, ego kicks in and makes us doubt and fear, and it intensifies that sensation of separation. Okay? That's why it is important to abdicate ego, or to contain it, or to train it, to reintegrate it with our whole self. We can't kill ego, because it is unnecessarily, it's there. It's part of our biology. It's part of our spiritual functioning. But there is a massive amount of healing that ego needs to go through before it can stop playing that role of trickster and seducer of the ego's downward spiral path. Once we start achieving that, and it's baby steps, folks, little tiny baby steps, but once we really begin our own individual internal journey of self-liberation, and we can recognize at an intellectual level, at a heart intuitive level, at a spiritual energetic level, we can recognize and realize that there's only one consciousness that is simultaneously experiencing everyone's individual life and projecting/creating the entire cosmos, then the game changes. And that's where we're at. That's the drama of this current act of the play that we're in. We're at the tipping point, folks. We've been working on this project for a really long time. Or another way to put it is, this play that we're playing has been playing out for, several acts already. And we are about to hit the climactic part where we learn the lesson as a species and begin a transcendent evolutionary change, which would be like, the denouement of the drama and the end of this play, which will prepare us for the beginning of the next play. Or to use a different analogy, we're about to graduate from kindergarten, folks, unless we screw ourselves over and have to start kindergarten again. Realizing that there is only one consciousness, which you can do both intellectually and spiritually and emotionally, so all three ways, and it's not impossible to do. People try to fight it, try to deny it, just like in the Matrix, those who are trapped in the Matrix fight to defend the others that are trying to release them from the Matrix. That movie is a brilliant analogy. But once we realize that, and we start working our spiritual path, it becomes clear and self-evident that to awaken our true self, the fullest, to achieve what, the ancient mystics called ascension or enlightenment or transcendence, to achieve that, not only must we work on ourselves and heal ourselves, we must also facilitate the awakening of all other beings. Now, that is not about convincing them or forcing them to believe in an ideological construct about enlightenment. That would be falling for the same pit trap that Christianity fell for, that Judaism fell for, that every religion that has ever come before has fallen for, which then opens the door for the hijackers to hijack it and use the very words of enlightened masters against the best intentions of those who believe in those words. The rest of the passage is sort of like a mantra of commitment. And it is true that mantras work. And there are many mantras, right? And sometimes it's overwhelming when you start looking up mantras or chants or prayers or whatever word you want to use. There's so many from so many different cultures. Why? Because at every historical era, we need to sort of update them so that they work for us now. That's why I like this. It's postmodern. In fact, this film, Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds, it's not where I get my belief system, and many people have accused me of that ever since I became a fan of the film. No, my personal spiritual journey and my research into this subject began when I was 9. I'm 41. So I was on this jam long before Inner Worlds came out. Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds came out. It just was a beautiful confirmation of the same sorts of research and inspired, intuitive realizations that I had already lived through. Mind you, I say this often, I am not claiming to be enlightened. I am not an ascended master. I am no one special. I'm just another human being with lots of ego problems. And that's why I love the rest of this passage. Because it's not about perfection, it's about progress, individual and collective progress. And this helps us to this passage really is a great reminder. If we make a commitment intellectually, spiritually, emotionally to awaken ourselves, that means we cannot ignore our others. This may seem at odds with an old teaching that I've addressed many times, that those who know do not speak and those who speak do not know. But that was a wisdom that was appropriate for a time and an era specific to historical context where the oppressors were definitely on the winning side. They were the majority, and it was important to preserve this ancient wisdom. Therefore, it was made a cult. That's where the word occult means. Not to be confused with cult, which, let's not go down that rabbit path. I'm not talking about joining a cult. I'm talking about esoteric knowledge that needed to be preserved by being codified and hidden away so that the oppressors would miss it and, in that instance, and not destroy it, which there was a massive campaign over many, 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 many years, centuries arguably, to destroy this information. Okay? So, back to this phrasing, back to this passage. If we're going to do that, then we need to acknowledge the following things, or else we'll never make any progress. That's why I think this flows the way it flows. There are innumerable sentient beings in the universe. Arguably, there is an infinite amount of sentient beings in the universe because there is, an infinite number of people in an infinite universe. It's logical. We're still here sometimes. Many of us are caught up in the debate about whether or not there is life on other planets. That's silly. Of course there must be life on other planets. We have not found strong, mundane, practical evidence for it quite yet because of the limitations of our technology and of our beliefs. Beliefs limit your perception, remember. But if the universe is infinite and its primary function is that of a womb, in other words, every planet is a mother and every sun is a father, the light of the sun impregnates the womb of the planet mother and gives birth to life. So anywhere there is a star sun shining radiant energy of light wave particle form onto a planet that has the right conditions on it, then there must be living things. Whether or not we will recognize them as people is our own ego problem, right? And as in terms of when we'll find them, long enough timeline, and we'll all, be one happy family intergalactic community. Many argue that that's already happening. That some claim to be in contact with the Federation of Intergalactic Species. Is that a thing? I don't know for sure. It seems plausible. I haven't found any reason to find it impossible. I have not been in contact directly with anybody from any of those, federational planets out there. By the way, if any of you are listening, I'm down. Invite me to the spaceship. Beam me up already. I think I could be really useful at that level. But then again, I must clearly not be ready to be contacted yet because I have not been contacted. Let's not get caught up in that little rabbit hole either. We'll save that discussion for another episode. But ancient mystics tell us that the universe is a living thing and its primary purpose is to produce living sentient beings. So there must be, right? And if we narrow our focus just to our brothers and sisters here, then there's an infinite number of them because we keep making babies. And we will not achieve individual enlightenment in the fullest sense, mind you, in the graduating from kindergarten going on to first grade until the species does. Some of us achieve individual enlightened one status like Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Abraham, Gandhi, Mithra. There's a list of thousands of names, mind you, that have been sort of swept under the rug by the oppressors of people who stood up against the status quo and said, hey, everybody, love and compassion, forgiveness and enlightenment, that's the jam. And that's been going on for centuries. And arguably, we are overdue, which leads me to the topic of a whole nother episode, which is I strongly am convinced by that which I've witnessed, experienced, and researched that we will witness, as a species, a new enlightened master of the Christ consciousness level, like Jesus or Buddha, and that this time around it'll be a woman. Thus, the rise of feminist thinking and the rise of goddess thinking and the essential sort of movement of the divine feminine going on throughout the world. Whether you are a man or a woman, our goal is to enlighten the species, and to do that, we must vow to help us all awaken. Now, the most direct and effective way to help others awaken is to work on your own enlightenment first. Not in a greedy way, not in a self-abating way, self-debasing way, not in a self-righteous way, but in an inner, introspection and ascension, looking for the truth within ourselves so that we can connect to the truth in each other. And that's a difficult task because my imperfections are inexhaustible. Anybody claiming to be perfect, anybody claiming to be enlightened, and then trying to profiteer on it is full of nonsense, okay? And I don't want to get into the mode of disparaging them. Maybe they have received a lot of wisdom. But at every step, there's ego trap, okay? And I'm not trying to brag here, but I'm never going to charge any money for this. I am always going to hope that someone helps support this project through donations and helps, through the... there's other projects that I do that will be commercial, like my fiction. I'm writing some books. But... every step of the way, we have imperfections to overcome, including, receiving some wisdom and then getting self-righteous about it and charging money, from others in order to share it. So I put that out there as a critique because everyone ends up doing it. Religions end up doing it. Individual prophet type, people who claim to be a prophet and then charge money for profit. Get the vicious cycle. Isn't it funny how those two words are so similar? A prophet, one who speaks truth, and profit, the act of hoarding money. There's a weird, creepy similarity there, and that's because it's a warning to not confuse the two. And we must humble ourselves to overcome our imperfections at every step of the way, or else we are not achieving enlightenment for ourselves and for the species. We must vow to overcome those inexhaustible imperfections. The Dharma is unknowable, and I vow to know it. Dharma is a very complex word. It's very deep, it's very rich, it's very ancient. And we're going to have to do a whole nother episode about it because I'm running out of time. But know that it is there to be discovered, and we must vow to discover it. The same way with the way or path of awakening. It is unattainable. I must vow to attain it. What do these seemingly paradoxical things mean? I think Eric, oh gosh, I can never pronounce his name. Eckhart Tolle. Is that how you pronounce it? You know who I'm talking about. He's a motivational speaker and an author and a writer. And yes, he sells his books for money. And I'm not trying to criticize him. I don't think he's profiteering because he gives a lot of speeches and he makes a lot of, he puts a lot of his content out for free. It's a balance, right? We shouldn't be trying to profiteering on anybody. But even mystics got to hustle. And even mystics got to make a living in this mundane world. So we got to balance those things. But I'm sidetracking myself. Here's what he said that's important. I think Buddha said something just very similar to this, and so did Gandhi, and so did every other enlightened master. Different phrasing in each era. But you achieve the awakening by remembering that you are already there. Or you become Buddha by realizing that you are already Buddha. We are born out of nature. And in nature, none of the ideological constructs that we believe in actually exist. Right? Ask an owl or a tree or a cat or a bumblebee about profit, or about blindly believing in this person or that person's religion. They'll have none of that. They ain't got time for that shit. They are too busy enjoying the blessings and the scary things of life. Spirituality and enlightenment is not about destroying or eradicating the harsh, difficult, challenging, scary, frightening things. It's about integrating them into our lives with forgiveness, compassion, and healing. This is an original statement of mine that you can find in 2 memes. I'm going to redact it down to a simple sentence. The light and the dark are not here to destroy each other. They are twins. They are here to challenge each other, to challenge and confront each other in the process of reintegration, which is another way of describing enlightenment. What is enlightenment ultimately? It is the reintegration of all the separateness in this illusion of separation. That is the process. Singularity, the original divine source, splits itself up into duality, to create the original dichotomy of you and me. Then it splits itself up into the trichotomy of you and me and them, and it goes on. If you want to know more about that, Google sacred geometry. That's the symbolic representation of the entire fractal process that creates the complexity and diversity that we experience in this universe. And so the light and the dark are not at odds with each other. It just appears that way from our limited perspective here in the material plane. And as Rumi put it, to find God, you must simply be God. No, that's not what he said. What did he say? To love is to be God. That's what he said. He's got a few other passages that are really beautiful and very moving and get right to that point. All right, folks, my time's about to run out for this particular episode, but I really wanted to share that, especially the last couple of, I wanted to break it down, and I want to encourage you to try this out as your mantra. Remember, I'm not asking you to believe in anything blindly. I'm inviting you to investigate it and to try it out. Because I can't prove to you externally that any of this is real. That's not possible. What I can do is encourage you and point you in the direction of inward introspection and meditation and contemplation, where you can discover the proof of it for yourself. That's why it's so hard to prove any of this, because the proof is resident within us. Or as one of my original memes says, look within. The revolution is inside you. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope that you found this interesting, fascinating, and thought-provoking. And I wish you a day full of peace, love, and grooviness. Please share this if you like it. Please post, comment, send me your questions, send me your arguments. I will address them both online in writing and also in future episodes of this podcast, or ZenCast. Until next time, this has been the Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. May peace, love, and grooviness be with you.